Hey everybody, how's it going? So like I said, I was gonna do another live stream during the week since I kind of flubbed the last one, messing around with the camera and all that. I think I found a good place for it. Looks good. Let's see everything in the back, and hopefully everybody can hear me and y'all don't have that interference that I had last time. So, in the last live stream, I touched a little bit on our last/current case. I'm still going through some of the evidence on that. Actually, I'm going through all the evidence on that. So far, all I've had time to do is go through some of the pictures. I think we might actually caught some cool stuff on there. Of course, I got to blow it up, kind of enhance it, check it a little bit, make sure it's not, normal stuff that we can debunk. But we talked a little bit about how the client kind of felt that it was more than just like a ghost or just typical residual paranormal activity. They thought it was possibly demonic, and so we tried to research it as something possibly demonic, because it's pretty negative. It was scaring the kids, it was scaring the homeowner, it was scaring the boy. Actually scared the hell out of the boyfriend. Actually, he's the one that got us involved. And so we were kind of looking into it that way, which, when you talk about demons and negative entities and things like that, certain questions come up, spiritual warfare, can you be attacked? Can it hurt you? And a big one is, can you be possessed? Different religions, different faiths, different people, things like that. We all have different opinions on demonic possession, on whether or not it's real, not real, how it happens, why it happens, if it's preventable, if it's just something that just happens out of nowhere. Is it demons? It also comes up as, is it mental health? And I don't know if you followed my posts and my discussions for like the past 2 or 3 days, that I'm kind of in the middle of a funk. If you followed me at all, or me at all personally, that I suffer with some pretty severe clinical depression. I have mental illness. I have depression, anxiety, that's brought on by my, if you can call it, my own PTSD, and it causes issues with me. It causes manic depression. Like I have bad mood swings. It can cause me to be pretty verbally abusive, short temper, things like that. It's not something I'm super proud of, but it's something that over the last few years I've come to grips with. I've been more open about it, because it's a part of me, and part of getting better or being better is being open about stuff like that. So that's something I've done, especially on my social media page. A, because it helps me to vent. B, because anybody that also suffers with things like that, I kind of, at least in my mind, in my head, I feel like they could, see that somebody else is going through the same things and benefit from being able to relate to some of those things and know that they're not the only ones going through it. I know a lot of times when I see other people talking about their depression, their experiences, things like that, it helps me to know, like I'm not the only one, or that somebody may have a similar experience. Like nobody's going to know exactly what you're going through, because things like that are relative to your situation. They're relative to your personality, but it helps to know that there's people that have an idea, right? So if that's something you suffer with, then I definitely have an idea what you're going through. And, when I'm mentally able to, right now would not be a good time, because I'm, going through my own issues. And so I've got to slog my way through that. I got to, put myself forward, pretend to be a person, things like that. But I try to be there for other people when I can. And the reason that relates to paranormal is those symptoms that I'm talking about, having angry, violent, short temper outbursts, things like that. Severe depression, feeling isolated, sadness, the lashing out. These are all symptoms that mirror classic demonic possession, or what somebody would call demonic possession. So the question comes up is like, first off, how do you tell the difference? Second off, is there a difference? And, is there one or another? Now, I'm not a psychologist. And honestly, like, I love talking about the topic. And, it's probably, once we start doing the podcast, like I've been talking about, I'm going to want to bring this subject up again with Sarah and Allie on the podcast, because they're both trained in psychology. I am not. I'm well read, but they have gone to school and taken classes for this, and so their opinions are, levels above mine on this. Just like if I was talking about sound waves or something mechanics, things like that, they're super intelligent and they would know what they're talking about. But I would probably have a more detailed explanation, so they could get into it. Sarah, who's basically in charge of psychologically evaluating all our clients, I'm sure what she would have to say about this is good. But like I said, I've been having a bad week. I've been thinking about this, and so I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. So this is from a perspective of somebody that doesn't know a ton about psychology. I just know a ton about my own psychology. As far as possession goes, I mean, first off, I'm agnostic. I don't select a denomination or anything like that. I have questions, and I don't take everything at face value as an agnostic. So, but the idea that someone could be possessed, in my younger years when I really subscribed to more spiritual things back then, I would have said that, yeah, that's a possibility that some intelligent creature, being, or whatever, could take you over and cause these different things, which you would have the different stages. Like I said, I'm not an expert in this matter either, but you would have, I believe it's infestation, then oppression, isolation, and finally, and then obsessions in there, and then finally possession. And it's when they talk about it and you do the research, like, it seems like a really legit thing, and I think it is to a degree, because it happens, and there's lots of stories, there's lots of firsthand accounts, there's I guess some videos, if you look for it, of really supernatural things happening, people having basically The Exorcist, maybe not to that degree. I realize that's a fictional show, but there are accounts of these things happening, and then, after an exorcism, it goes away. But there can be a big argument said for that being psychosomatic, because as technology has progressed, as our knowledge has progressed, we have learned more about mental health over the, all the way back to the 70s when The Exorcist came out. I mean, it was even addressed in that movie that, hey, we're learning more things about mental health, mental illness, mental disability, and so it's harder to separate. And so that research has to be done before you cause more damage than if you hadn't done anything at all. And I mean, so with this depression that I've been in the last 3 days, of course, like I said, I'm really open on social media. Most of the people that know me already, they'll say encouraging things here or there, but they know it's depression. They know this is me. This is something I go through. some of the new people on my page, though, I do appreciate the messages and everything, but I thought it was interesting, and I never thought about it before in like this context, but I got some private messages referring back to the last live stream I did, talking about going to this house to do an investigation of what is possibly demonic activity, and then my depression immediately followed that. And so the concerns were, do I think I might be experiencing oppression? Do I think I might be experiencing some early stage of depression, or that something's following me around, or that it came home with me? And just to outright answer that question, no, I don't really think that. In all the investigations that we've done, I've only even remotely once felt like maybe something followed me home, but in all likeliness, it was just my cats had discovered that I had cabinets, and that's a different story. But it's just I haven't personally seen any evidence of that. And like we were telling the client, everybody jumps to demons, because especially here in the West, in the United States, I know I've got some viewers from the UK that might be watching this, but I don't know about different cultures outside of the US, but here in the US, especially in the South, in the Bible Belt, if there's something negative going on and it's paranormal, it's demons. It's always demons, and we always worry about it. We try to avoid the word demon, because I just feel like it brings on this different connotation, and it presets your mind to thinking something that may not necessarily be true. Do I think there's paranormal things out there that we're registering and communicating with that aren't human? That's yes, I do. Actually, most of the things that we've got evidence of that seem to have an intelligence to them, they never seem to be human. Sometimes they seem to be pretending to be human, but they don't seem to be human. But when you say demon and conjure that up as, fallen angel, Christian demons sort of thing, I don't necessarily think that is a thing. I think it's something alien to us, maybe older than humanity, maybe from a different time. Like, I've never wanted to, as part of my research, try to speculate what those things could be, in the facts. But if we're sitting here talking about opinion, I don't necessarily subscribe to any one religion, so I don't want to call something a demon from a specific religion or mode of thinking. It's a non-human presence. And as a non-human, how could you really, it seems negative to us, but how could you really understand something that's not humans' motives, if that makes any sense? Like, it's above us, it's going to have a different mode of thinking. When we're little kids and we're frying ants with a magnifying glass, is that little kid evil? No, but to that ant, that seems pretty horrific, right? But it doesn't know the motives. It doesn't understand that, that's a kid being curious, and it doesn't really see it as like another living thing. As adults, you're putting pesticide on your yard and killing bugs left and right. Does that make you evil? It's a slippery slope argument, so it's a hard one to make, and it's one I try to reserve judgment on. But back to the mechanics of demonic possession sort of thing. No, to answer your question, no, I don't think I'm experiencing oppression. I don't think my depression comes from demonic possession or anything like that. Because the evidence shows I've suffered with depression, anxiety, for the better part of my life, like my entire adult life. And some of my teens. Okay, so judging by a bigger scope, a bigger pattern, it's definitely depression, demonic possession. But you don't want to rule things like that out, because there's things we don't understand. But I mean, years ago, in the 70s, if you would have asked somebody that same question, might have, we were just at the forefront of really learning more about how the psyche works, how psychosomatic things happen, so there might have been more of a question. You go back even further to the early 1900s, like actually, if you go to just the late 1800s, during the spiritualist movement, before psychology was a thing, and you ask that question, you get a completely, that would be completely up for debate. Things have evolved so much, and there will be one side of the argument that says, well, maybe they've evolved so much that we just completely discount the spiritual side of it. And that is true. That is a consequence. I mean, in 1895, Emil Kraepelin, he came up with the first diagnosis of manic depression as apart from schizophrenia. It wasn't called schizophrenia at the time. I don't remember the word, but he was really one of the first people to kind of separate out the diagnosis and see it as something separate from a personality disorder to a mental disorder. But he saw it was all part of the same thing. And then 1917, that's when Sigmund Freud really started to advance the research into psychology. And he would, during his career, he would go into way more depth, into classifying all the different types of mental disorders, but they were all classified as psychological. So depression, or I believe it was called melancholiness, was a psychological disorder. I believe he did some of the first work on split personalities, which is dissociative personality disorder. Might be saying that wrong since I don't have psychology people here. But the split personality thing, I think he did the first work on that. Behavioral studies, but they were all psychological disorders. He thought these were all things that could be worked through, cured, and studied through therapy, talking about it, reliving it, confronting it, stuff like that. But in more recent years, the 70s moving up, we've learned that a good portion of the time that the conditions of all these different conditions, really, they can be caused by a multitude of different reasons. That can include trauma, like PTSD. Something could happen to you and you were fine before, but now you have clinical depression, or now you have now you have issues. They can be underlying causes, which means, you could suffer from manic depression from a predisposition from birth. These are always a part of you. And then as medicine has evolved, we've also found out that a lot of it can actually just be chemical disorders, like your body stops producing certain types of chemicals and hormones. You could have a traumatic accident or whatever, and your body just doesn't work the same anymore, especially over age. A lot of my problems have got worse over the years because of low testosterone, right? So I need testosterone treatments, and that'll help. And then, taking different medications can fix serotonin levels, things like that, SSIs. But as that's evolved, we've learned that there's a lot of these cases that we had in the past where before we had that science knowledge in place, we immediately jumped to a spiritual, paranormal sort of place. And in some cases, I think we might have done a lot of damage. There's a lot of exorcisms that ended up in the death of the person that was undergoing the exorcism from starvation, aggravating the mental condition, things like that. But then we have a good portion of cases where exorcism helped. So does that mean that possession is real? Well, no. Yes and no. There could be other causes for that, why that worked. And just to boil it down, it could be like the placebo effect, but it's a psychosomatic effect. If you believe you're possessed, then you believe in the exorcism. And I mean, that is a very plausible idea. And I think in a lot of cases, I think in most cases, it's probably right. But that's coming from a place that I've never seen a truly convincing demonic possession myself. And so that's not from a place of, I don't believe that this could be a possible thing, or that I think so-and-so is a liar. But as we were explaining to the client, who jumped to demons, and we try not to go there until we have to go there. But what we were trying to explain to him is, I think movies and stories and media that have hyped that up have given the collective people a predisposition to have a certain idea about those things and scare them ahead of time. Because if that stuff is real, if there are people out there that are getting thrown up against walls and choked and scratched and things like that, it's almost a paradox, because we're paranormal investigators, and in the early days of us going in and doing investigations, I would have said, well, we're still new, people aren't calling us. Here it is, like almost 6 years later, and we get a lot of calls now. We get called out on these cases, and 99% of them are, well, it's just this interesting thing that's got, like, they're not scared of it. They don't think it's a demon. They just think their house is haunted, or their place of business is haunted, and they think it's interesting, and they think it's mischievous, and they just want to check it out a little bit more, and that's what we do. 1% of the calls we get are people saying, there is something negative in my house. And we're like, okay. And one of the first things I always ask is, do you feel like you're in danger? Do you feel like you're being harmed? Anything like that. Even in the cases where people, even in this case, no, I think it's a demon in the house, but there's nothing really bad going on. It's just kind of scary. Okay. So even in those cases, we're not seeing the cases like what are in people's heads. And so the question has to be asked is, where are these cases? And the only times I see them are at some of the, like, on the documentaries on TV, where people are charging to talk about their experience, things like that. They're in where you see these really extreme cases. I've noticed there always seems to be a little bit of money, not a lot, and I'm not accusing everybody of, making up stories for money, but from what I've seen in the almost 6 years that we've done this, there always seems to be money involved with that level of claim. And the fact we've done over 100 cases now, a lot of those we were called out. A good portion of those we were called out for negative activity and things like that. But I have not seen any of the signs of classic demonic possession or attachment or oppression or any of those things. And even in the cases where people are experiencing some of, like, the depression and the down feelings and things like that, they have a history before the event of depression, or they had things. Oh, no, you're not too late. I've mostly been talking to a blank room. But the depression that they have seems to have already been there. Like, they they suffer from a clinical depression that seems to improve when we say, we think you know, maybe think about changing your medication, things like that. And then, you know, they follow those sort of medical advice, you know, or lifestyle changes, things like that. And just like that, the paranormal activity goes away. That can't be coincidence, is the thing. Sure, you could, I mean, I guess you can make a case for mental well-being affecting actual paranormal events. And that's one of the things that we're trying to study with this new phase that we're going into, where we're actually having a lot of our clients take psychological written tests, take personality tests. We're doing longer questionnaires. We're doing more interviews about their life outside of the paranormal events. And what we're doing is we're collecting, we're not putting a name to it. It's you know, anonymous to everybody but us, but we're taking that data, we're charting it, we're correlating it between people to see if there's trends between, we basically classify people in three categories. There's, you know, firm believers in paranormal activity, people that don't believe in paranormal activity, and people that believe in the possibility of paranormal, you know, they're in the middle somewhere. And then we cross-reference that with, have they had paranormal experiences or have they not had paranormal experiences? You know, and of course, most of the people that call us, they've had some kind of paranormal experience, but we also interview the other people that are around the area that live with them or whatever, that might not have had an experience. And so we don't have enough data to come up with a conclusion, but, you know, we're charting those trends which could tell us a couple of things about mental health is related to the paranormal. One, it could tell us, do people of a certain mental type, you know, with like certain issues or non-issues, things like that, do they have a predisposition to see paranormal things where paranormal things may or may not exist? You know, are they more isolation, loneliness, and age? Yes. I mean, it's part of the study. It's actually kind of part of the questionnaire. Most of the people that, you know, we talk to, they're usually in some kind of environment where multiple people live in the house, which is actually really useful for the data because we can interview the separate people. But going back, the data can tell us a couple of things. One, it can tell us, do people have a predisposition to see paranormal activity by, you know, does depression cause you to see things that aren't actually there, right? So that sort of thing. The other thing it can tell us is, do certain mental disorders or personality type, you know, the things we're charting, is there something on there that actually makes you more open to legitimate paranormal activity? So like the way we're cross-referencing it is, you know, we do the investigation at these places where we've charted all these character traits and mental traits and tests that people done, and, you know, we'll find no evidence of paranormal activity, but these people are obviously reporting it. Do these people all have something in common? Or we'll go to that location and we will find evidence of possible paranormal activity, making a good case for, okay, these people actually saw the things that they're telling us about, which, you know, we always assume right off the bat that everyone's experiences are honest, but that also tells us, okay, do the people that may have actually experienced something, do they all have something in common? And there may be a correlation between types of depression and those sort of things. So like if you have a predisposition to be depressed, like it's caused by a chemical imbalance or something like that, then it's possible that you're more prone to imagine paranormal activity. Whereas if you had a traumatic experience that caused you to be depressed, you may actually be more sensitive to paranormal events and notice it better than other people, and then it's actually documentable. it's that kind of thing. That's where we're going with that kind of research. That's also one of the reasons we desperately want to buy an EEG, because what we want to do is take samples of brain activity in places where we have pretty much disproven all paranormal activity as much as possible, and then found heavy signs of paranormal activity or a possibility of paranormal activity, and see if different parts of the brain light up and react in different ways. And that could tell us a lot about how our brains work in relationship to perceiving paranormal or believing in the paranormal. But I don't know. I just thought it was a really good topic just because I've had a rough last couple of days. I'm just kind of starting to feel a little bit better today. I've always struggled with depression, anxiety, which it's mental illness. With me, it's a combination of chemical imbalance and predisposition. And I thought it was interesting that I was getting, private messages about, do you think this is related to the last case that you were talking about? And I mean, I guess and I said it's never come up before. I guess it has come up before because, at the Kyle investigations, I always had like a feeling of depression afterwards. I think it's somewhat related because the thing is I kind of get depressed after every investigation. Well, not every, almost every any investigation that I'm like invested in, because the anxiety of it kind of gets to me, if that makes sense. Like staying up overnight and looking for things that are possibly kind of scary is a semi-stressful situation. And so being on edge, being observant, being tired, things like that, those do trigger my depression to an extent. But it usually doesn't last like a really long time. This depression I've had has been like the past 3-4 days, and it actually started a little bit before the investigation anyway, but I don't think that they're related to each other. But appreciate everybody's questions and comments I've had over the past few days. Like I said, I'm going to try to do the live streaming a little bit more, and hopefully this will be like an in-between thing, in between podcasts, which I think this is a good topic for us to talk about on our next podcast after I have the girls with me, which are, way smarter in the field of psychology, and they might bring up some really good points. I actually wish they were in the chat right now to kind of spur me along. I want to talk about that. I think I want to talk about Ouija boards a little bit more. These are all things based in like the psychological field, which is kind of the direction our group has been taking, which I'm really happy about because, our main goal in the past has been looking for physical evidence. Turns out physical evidence is really hard to find. I mean, we find it, but there's limited resource for it, especially since, our travel radius isn't huge. So how much physical evidence can we find? But being able to collect the psychological data is going to be really awesome, because that's going to give us another aspect to our study to kind of look at and develop and possibly present. And it will be hard data as opposed to the physical evidence, which has always been kind of iffy. So anyway, that's looks like that's 30 minutes. So if you guys have any questions about what I talked about, any ideas about, my next live stream or anything like that, just post a comment. I know most of y'all didn't catch this live. I think I only got 2 viewers the whole time. So just, since you watched the video, just, post in the comments, start a discussion. Happy to answer any questions you might have. If you have some comments on mental illness, depression, anxiety, things like that, hit me up, or how it relates to the paranormal. I don't know, just whatever you guys can think of, and I'm always looking for feedback, and we're trying to be more active and do more things. We have a investigation coming up this weekend. That'll be Saturday. We'll probably start live streaming around 9 or 10 o'clock. It's kind of iffy on the start time, but it will be from the, we'll have one live stream going from the A.W. Perry Museum itself. It'll be an unmanned static cam in the doll room with a I'm going to set up a high sensitivity microphone in there. But nobody's going to be in the house. So I'll actually be depending on all of my viewers to keep an eye on that for me to see if we capture any evidence while we're not there. Because if we do that, it would be really cool because there's nobody there to contaminate the data. And then then on the other channel, on the other live stream, we will be using handhelds and just a little bit of static equipment at the A.W. Perry Historical Cemetery, which is normally off limits after hours. We've got special permission from the authorities in Carrollton are going to let us in there, and the museum curator, John Swindle, is going to be there with us. Or I don't think he's the curator. I think he's the director of education there. Sorry. But he's going to be with us. He works at the A.W. Perry Museum. And then to finish up the night, we'll probably go back to the museum and try to do some EVPs. But we'll be doing that Saturday. That'll be a good time to tune in. See us doing some stuff. Then, of course, don't forget, we've got the book. Be sure to check it out on Amazon.com, After Dark Paranormal Investigations, which I talk about a lot of the things that I've been talking about in the live stream. I talk about like how EVPs work, different sound waves, and we tell stories about all our different investigations. So there's that. So, like I said, any suggestions you might have or questions, just hit us up in the comments. All right. Talk to you all later.